Welcome to the BioAlabama Faces of Science series, where we, the BioAlabama interns, chat with bioscience professionals about their journeys from academia to their careers. We are Brooke Bailey and Abby Rusi, and today we are speaking with Dr. Rachel Lane, the CEO of BioAlabama.
Oh, hello. Hi, Dr. Lane. To kick off this interview, we were hoping if you could give a brief introduction to who you are, what your current role is, and what organization you work for.
Yeah, so I am CEO of BioAlabama, which is the trade association for the bioscience industry here in Alabama. We're the state affiliate for Bio International. And I just am really excited to be here and to talk with y'all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Could you briefly describe what BioAlabama does practically to people who might not know what a trade association organization does?
Sure. So I think in a nutshell, we are ecosystem builders. So we're trying to create an ecosystem for the bioscience industry to grow and thrive in our state. That can look a lot of different ways, and I'm sure we'll probably get into that in some more detail today. But in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do is connect the resources that our companies need to really have a substantial, meaningful industry.
And going off of that, can you describe what your normal workday looks like?
I don't have a normal work day, Brooke. It looks different every day. But that's also part of what I love. What I realized early on when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career was that I love puzzles. The more pieces of the puzzle there are, the more fun I really have. So and that's really what I get to do in this job is I get to have conversations with our different stakeholders, whether that's universities or students or our companies or investors, and try to figure out how they all fit together and where are the gaps that we need to fill. So a lot of conversations, but then also as a one-woman team, I'm also in charge of the back office. So, I have to do updating websites and figuring out what our social media campaign is going to look like. It's really it's fun because there's a lot going on, a lot of pieces, but sometimes you really have to know how to prioritize.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were curious how you found yourself in this current role. Like, what was the most recent step to actually get you here? Because this job sounds super unique.
Yeah, well, it is super unique and it is a lot of fun. I would say it was really important for me. So I actually didn't start out in science. I started out as a clinical dietitian. And in that first job, I found myself really trying to figure out, I knew that wasn't where I wanted to stay. And so I had to reassess what my priorities were and what I really wanted to get out of my professional life. And I've just kind of constantly reevaluated that at every step. So when I was in grad school, I was working on my PhD in biochemistry, molecular biology. I realized that I really loved to connect worlds. So being able to connect my experience as a dietitian in a clinical world with my experience as a scientist in a laboratory, like being able to bridge some of those communication and cultural gaps was something that I found I was really good at, and that was really rewarding. And so then after grad school, I took that first job after grad school. That job's always hard to find. Just for anyone who's going through that process, just stick with it. That first job is hard, but you end up putting some more tools in your tool belt, and you can move on from there. But so I took that first job, but just really knew I needed to build with my own blocks. So I started a company called The Written Science, where I was able to help communicate the business value of biotechnology. And I was doing that for about 3 years, and then was approached about this position. And what I love about it, it still gives me the opportunity to build with my own blocks. We're starting kind of from the ground floor. So I get to do that. And then I also get to continue to connect worlds. So, with that ecosystem building, we're connecting the academic world and the industry world and the service provider world. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, I know you've said that you have a lot of things that you enjoy about this role and a lot of things you're very passionate about. But do you have one favorite thing that you have about this role?
Oh, one favorite thing. I think any time that I am able to see the opportunity for collaboration or partnership from my perspective. So like, all of our stakeholders, they're down in the trenches, like trying to move their one entity forward. But when I can, in my position, I'm privileged to kind of see more of a bird's eye view. And so whenever I can see like, hey, there's some opportunity here for these two to work together and shoulder some of the burden, but then also like enjoy more of the fruits of their labor together, then that feels really, really good.
That's actually super cool that you're able to combine these things.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that type of question, what's been the biggest challenge you've had to overcome?
Just being a one-woman team. I think I also have a timeline in my mind. I see all the things that we need to do, and I see how we can get them done, but we have finite time and finite resources. And so the biggest challenge is being able to prioritize and then be patient enough with that timeline to know that it will happen, maybe not as quickly as we want, but that, you just really have to kind of like continue to put one step in front of another. And sometimes that can be really hard when you're someone who just likes to run.
I know you talked just briefly about your academic journey, but are there any details that you'd like to add, or did you always know that you were going to go into bioscience?
I didn't. I started out in nutrition. That was my undergrad. And, it's kind of funny when you look back, you can see the recurring themes that have driven you all, along the whole way. And whenever I was deciding on nutrition, this was a time when kind of the internet, way back when the internet was just really becoming accessible for everyone. And there was a lot of misinformation. And I was like, I want to help people understand like what the truth about nutrition is. And so that's what I started out doing. And then whenever I was working as a clinical dietitian, I realized that patients who seem to have the same conditions respond very differently to the same nutritional intervention. And so to me, that indicated that there was a biochemical reason for this that we didn't understand. So then that's when I went back to grad school. And again, just being really motivated for that messaging to make sure that the message about biotechnology was clear and true, really drove me forward as well. And I would say going back to school after working is really hard because you're used to your worth and value being measured by what you can actually do. So going to like a graded system again was really challenging. And I think that was like my grad school. I had like the lowest GPA ever, but I was so proud of it because I worked so hard for it. But I also knew that what I was doing in the lab was more important than like my classroom. And so I think just kind of having that perspective, especially having worked and then gone back to academia, like having that perspective of, okay, grades are fine, but if I'm producing meaningful research in the lab, like that's really what's going to drive my career and the world forward was really helpful. So there's definitely pros and cons to going back to school. But I think that the perspective, people who take some time off and go back later, this perspective that they bring is really valuable.
Yeah, that's super insightful. And I'm curious, so you've touched on some of the jobs that you've had and the fact that you went and worked and then came back to school, but what kind of pushed you during those decisions to pivot from working? Like what was the actual motivator that got you to go back to your PhD?
Oh man, like I feel like we're digging deep now. So I am a very I internalize a lot and spend a lot of time kind of figuring out like what does drive me forward, what is important to me. And so at every step along that way, I really had to check myself and figure out and be pretty honest about what my strengths and weaknesses are. For example, when I was trying to decide, when I knew I didn't want to continue along the nutrition career trajectory, that I needed something more, I was looking at, okay, do I go back to med school? Do I go to grad school? And one thing I realized was that after seeing patients all day as a dietitian, I was exhausted. And I knew that I didn't want to go home every night to my family and feel like that depletion. So I am an introvert, and just kind of recognizing that like I couldn't do that day in and day out. I mean, I could, but it wasn't going to give me the life that I felt like was going to be the most rewarding. So, and then on the flip side, I started working in a lab, and I would catch myself just kind of like singing in the tissue culture hood, and having a great time. And so just kind of realizing what gave me energy, and then also recognizing realizing that I'm very mission driven. And so like, for me, it wasn't about choosing the most lucrative career or like with the greatest earning potential, or the most like, I didn't want to rise to a corporate ladder or something like that. It was important for me to really believe in the mission that I was serving. So those were things I just kind of had to constantly reevaluate.
Yeah, and so with all of that being said, as you reflect on your personal and professional journey, is there a big lesson that you'd like to say that shapes the way you are right now?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think two things that have served me really well are honesty with myself about what makes me happy, what's important to me, and what am I good and not good at. You have to like admit both of those things. It's been, that's been really helpful. And then resilience, like you gotta be willing to roll with the highs and the lows. They're both going to be there, and acknowledging that, recognizing that, moving forward through those good times. You got to celebrate the good times, but then also you got to move through the bad times. I think that resilience has really helped me take risks that others might not have been comfortable with, and reap the rewards from that. Those are, especially in entrepreneurship, that is a roller coaster, high highs, low lows. So you really got to be able to roll with it.
Yeah. And then one final wrap up question. So both of us are students, and we were curious if you have a piece of advice to students or young professionals, what advice would that be?
Pay attention to what captures your imagination as you're going through your classes. So when I decided to go back to school and knew I was going to go on the research route, I called my chemistry professor from undergrad, because that class was hard. It was the first class I had ever needed a tutor for. But I loved it. I just loved it. I just had so much fun in that class. And so I would encourage any student, pay attention to what makes you feel the most alive, and then have resilience to follow that through the highs and the lows.
All right, Dr. Lane, that is all we got for you. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be a part of this and to speak with us. And it was really great speaking with you. I know you said a lot of amazing things that I'm definitely going to take to heart.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with y'all.